So you were asking about metta.
Yes, Metta and just also the Brahma Viharas in general, and how they factor into practice. Because
Okay.
I had seen a video that you had done about Metta with Martin, I believe is his name,
Okay.
um, where you laid out some of your uh, thoughts about Metta, about how it's not a Buddhist practice, that it's like older than Buddhism, comes from Hinduism, etc.
Okay. All right. Well, I tell you what, that's really good that you're actually sitting there listening. And so we really don't need this talk. Let's cut the video off and you go home and 'cause I've been there, done that. And I was thinking, waiting for your call, that it would really be a good idea to do a video on metta because it's been a really long time since I've spoken to any students about it,
Hmm.
and it probably wasn't recorded. And here you are saying that I'm an old man now. I'm wrong. I don't know. But, it's a whole lot easier for you to find a video than for me to reflect whether a conversation I had or not with someone was recorded.
Sure.
Hang on a second. We just installed a new light,
Yeah.
and I recognize that having it on is actually influencing the video. So
Ah, okay.
we'll have to figure out something else about where to put that light so that it's not going to be um, in the way. But I don't generally do Skyping at night anyway.
Hmm.
And if I did, we couldn't record because it's
Right.
pitch black,
Too
even with
dark.
the lights on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why one of the reasons why we put that up, at least so that I could see the keyboard.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to metta. You were right that the practice of the Brahma Viharas, and when I say metta, I generally mean all of the Brahma Viharas
Hmm.
because it's a full practice. But that practice actually existed before the time of the Buddha, and it does have the quality that while it's got a lot of really, really good stuff in it, it's not liberating.
Sure.
And part of the reason that it's not liberating is mostly the third step of mudita is generally practiced backwards.
Hmm.
And it can and should be practiced backwards in the beginning until you get really good at it. But let's start with the foundation because the foundation is actually the end of it all anyway. The
Hmm.
foundation of metta is the word friendship, friendliness. That's the right word, the right way to translate it. And the word loving kindness is not it.
Hmm.
I do not know where the word loving kindness came from, but whoever it is, they were probably a Buddhist religionist rather than a noble.
Hmm.
That a much better way to look at it is friendship. And here's the reason why. Even though you could also use the word kindness, the
Sure.
problematic word is actually loving
Hmm.
because love has wanting in it.
Right.
That when you love something, you want to own it.
Hmm.
But you can be kind to something without wanting to own it.
Yeah.
All right. So, but friendship is actually the bottom line of that because that's also what it was in the Sangha in the time of the Buddha.
Hmm.
That everyone in those days was called friend. It was only very, very late in his life when he was about to die that he set up the hierarchy that had to do with the number of years that a monk has had. So that at 5 years, he's out on his own. 10 years, he could start taking students on his own and be called an achan. 20 years, and now you're a thera, and you could be the head dude at whatever is needed to be a head dude of. But then there's the Mahathera at 40 years, and that's the ones that people seek out for doing ordinations, especially if they're political ordinations. You know, the more years, the better. But Thera is the basic one, 20 years a month. And what I've come to understand is that even though the monk fits into the system and works his way through the system and is a good, proper monk, upright and upstanding, even though he holds wrong views and does not ever look like that he has in fact destroyed the first fetter in relationship to rebirth, still he has destroyed that first fetter through the behavior of fitting into the monkhood. That he's just simply become a good monk, and that's what he is now, not whoever he thought he was. Okay? What I'm saying is that there is some magic in there someplace. And I've seen that. I've seen it over time. I've been around this stuff a long time, and I begin to understand that there is something really noble that happens that has nothing to do with the doctrine or the belief systems of the monk. And so this station of Thera is kind of important because these are the guys that you want to be around, that you want to act like. And it doesn't matter what they teach. In that regard, I would hold Bhikkhu Thanissaro in very high regard. He is a Thera. Not only that, but the last time I talked to him, which was more than 20 years ago, and he was already a monk of monk's distinction 20 years, I think, then, so he may be a Mahathera by now. But at that time, he knew Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. So I know that he knows what is there. But there is a duality of the teaching. And you can see that duality all over the place. And the duality of the teaching winds up in the sense of that there is a teaching for the beginners. And then there is the teaching for the nobles. All right? You could almost go so far as I posted you that the metta practice is for the beginners. It is for those who are in the Buddhist religion. It has been there from the very beginning. The Buddha does talk about it in the sense of inviting all of these monks who practice metta and are well known for their metta practice into a lecture on Anapanasati.
So, like, almost what he did with, like, the teachings of, like, rebirth and all of that, like, trying to incorporate the
He
more
just brought it
Hindu
all in.
views.
He did not argue with it.
Yeah.
All right? You're not going to gain a whole lot of new friends by arguing with them over their beliefs, especially one that's that tight, because that goes right down to the fear of death, one of the most basic feelings we have. Right down to the survival instinct, and it goes after it right away.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing. And yet you turn things around and go from the top, and the whole issue or the end of the story is about conceit. Mana, I am, and I am in relationship to others. And so the big issue of that is comparisons, even though most of those comparisons are done inside the mind.
Yeah.
That we actually don't get into competitions with each other on often, but you can see the results of people who do want to compete with each other rather than being friends with each other.
Yeah.
Also, this quality of a friend means that it's not me and the other. It becomes an us.
Yeah.
That's also the breaking down of that ego barrier or the selfishness. So all of this stuff works together to bring about a state of selflessness, whatever they believe.
Right.
Isn't
Right,
that interesting?
because it's deeper than belief. Yeah.
Because it's deeper than the beliefs. It's down there to let's not be afraid of one another.
Yeah.
Let's not be afraid of one another. We're not competing with each other. There's nothing to compete for. There's no stations in life. And that's the way that the Buddha would like it to be. But unfortunately, without the Buddha there sitting in prominence over a massive 2,500-year-old Sangha, and it's really quite amazing, that Sangha that the Buddha started. Here's an example of that, how amazing it is. Would you believe that there's somewhere between maybe 2 and maybe 4 or as many as 6 million ordained Buddhists? Nuns, not
Maybe.
unreasonable, right?
Mm.
Okay, now show me an army anywhere in the world that's that big.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good point, isn't it? And it's got that long tradition. That's the amazing part of it, is that whatever the Buddha set up with his system, both of friendship and of this hierarchy of beginner, ascet, Achan, Thera, Mahathera system, if that was not there the way that it is, especially rooted in friendship, it may have not lasted 2,500 years, because it's had quite a lot of pressures from the outside to destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's get down to metta in the sense of this friendliness.
Yeah.
That we're actually starting to practice friendliness without even getting the understanding that we need to be friends with ourselves first, because he is our biggest enemy and always has been.
Right.
For instance, when anxiety comes, instead of making friends with it, pacifying it, and settling it down, we want to get rid of it. We want to pull it out. And the instinct is saying, wait a minute, this anxiety is there is to tell you something.
Right.
But when you start listening it, what happens is that we become an integrated whole.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually the unification of mind that is talked about in the Eightfold Noble Path. It's the process of bringing the mind together by bringing all the constituent parts into a set of friendliness rather than at odds with parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if we can come to this integration, anything that helps bring us there could be considered useful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in this regard, the Buddha just brings the Brahma Viharas right in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's an interesting thing: is that uh, this is actually a system that comes from the Brahmins, and yet by the time this is translated into English, Brahma Vihara winds up that the Brahma is a god, not the fellows down the street.
Mm.
And what the Vihara means is actually that's still the word that they use in Sri Lanka for the wats and the temples. They call it a Vihara. The Mahavihara is the big one in Colombo. So the word Vihara in Thai has just gotten shortened down. I mean, the Thai people, they know how to whack at words, and they've whacked a lot of them so that Dukkha becomes Duk, Sukha becomes Sukh, Kama becomes Kam, Dhamma becomes Dham, and Vihara becomes Wat.
Mm.
Because they can't say the V word.
Mm.
And by the word Bihara, when you think about it, you probably heard it from the context of Sanskrit that the word Hara is actually the word for heart. It's an actual Indo-European word, and it means the same. So Bihara means in the heart or
Mm.
in the home.
Interesting.
That's why they call it the Vihara, is where the monks live. That's their home. They're in Vihara, or they're in Hara. They're in their
Interesting.
home. Yes. So to practice the metta is to say, let all beings be happy. But if we are in a state of unhappiness, how can we wish others to be happy?
Right.
It's like, may all beings be happy, you know. I'm doing it because I have to. It's a ritual. It's a ceremony. But
Mm.
if you could come to that place as, Oh, wow, I wish everybody felt like this.
Yeah.
Then that's a different position.
Mm.
All right, now let's jump up a step a little bit and start talking about compassion. I propose to you that one's right noble view, while a right noble view does have components that are beyond it, one of the qualities of right noble view is the entire encompassment of compassion.
Mm.
That in fact, right noble view is even bigger than compassion, but it's a really, really big part of it. Why is that? Because we stop looking at it from our point of view and start seeing it from other points of view or all points of view.
Mm.
That's in fact one of the things that are really good about psychologists is that they are trained to look at things from the other person's point of view. That's what will make them a good psychologist.
Mm.
Unfortunately, they forget all about that when they go home
Yeah.
or whenever they become selfish.
Sure.
But it's a trained quality. And that training should be incorporated into your anapanasati practice so that when you're around other people, pay close attention to them.
Mm.
This is what your reality is right now. So if your sister or daughter comes up to you while you're fiddling at the keyboard, stop the keyboard and pay attention to what's happening.
Mm.
That's compassion, is to pay attention to the other person, to
Mm.
look at them, to notice them, to see how they're feeling. And if you don't, which most people don't, they will try to become grandiose to prove to you how they feel.
Mm.
But in fact, that's what human language is all about, is how can we explain how we feel?
Right. I heard you say something very interesting that like we use exaggeration to let other people know how we feel because we don't know about the sympathetic vibrational quality of feelings. So we think we have to make a big display in order to get people to know what we're feeling.
Especially when we're using something like the computer or let us say Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
And the bigger the thing you have to say, the louder it has to be said.
And the angrier, yeah.
Oh wow, isn't that interesting? Yes. And we're all, and but I, what everybody would love is to be, and when I say love, I mean lust or want. What
Mm.
everybody wants is for their own self to be loved. That's what they're all wanting. They want to be loved. And yet what they're putting out is not loving or
Yeah.
lovely. And so everybody's at each other's throat right now, and there's a whole lot of people with a whole lot of money who like that very well because they know if people stop hating on each other, they'll start hating the guys who's got the money.
Yep.
So this whole quality of compassion has to do with how can we look at and see other people for the way they are while they're in the environment that is there. When those people go away, now I've got a different environment. When they're in the environment, it's time to pay attention.
Mm.
Just like when we're on Skype together, you're paying attention and I'm paying attention and we can get someplace.
Yeah.
But if somebody's wanting your attention and you don't want to give it because you've got something else to do, now that's almost a recipe for somebody going into bad feelings and possibly an argument.
Mm.
So whenever that's the whole point of compassion that comes into right view, that we have to keep that right view expanding and expanding as best we can so that we finally figure out what the big truth is.
Mm.
And the big truth is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But we have to do a thorough investigation before we come to that conclusion. Otherwise, we'll keep thinking we know when in fact we're deluded.
Right.
And so, right view comes in as compassion. Now, you've already heard about sympathetic joy. That's an interesting word, sympathy. because there is, let us say, most people are unconscious of the effect that they have on each other. And they're also unconscious often of the effect that folks are receiving from the other person. That in fact everybody so owns their own mind and thinks this is me that they do not recognize that they have changed when someone has asked them a question or talked to them or whatever like that, that we're not really that closely aware of who I am every moment, so that when someone comes into my presence, I'm a different person than I was before they came in.
Right.
And they're a different person now that they've gotten there. And so now we're a we. And that we has a sympathetic vibration to it. You could say that it actually is so deep that it's instinctual. That we came out of mammals, which were most mammals are herd. They live in families. Before that, the reptiles would abandon their young. But we don't abandon our young. We keep them and nourish them. By law for 26. So that whole quality of wanting to collect together as a society actually has another side of it that's a twist, and that is the territorialism. That while we want to cling to those who we are close to, we want to distance ourselves even more from those who are not close to us. And so this is why there's a lot of animosity, is because we see them as other. And when we're really confused, we even see the people really close to us as other, rather than as we. Isn't that interesting? That a lot of marriages get broken up because there's two me's and no us there.
Yeah. The walls get very high and apparent. Yeah.
Why is that? Because I've got to protect myself. I'm afraid. I'm afraid to drop those boundaries and melt myself and become part of something bigger.
It's funny. It almost kind of reminds me of like when there's like a big band, and then one of the band members is insecure and then feels the need to go out and have a big, crazy solo career or something, rather than just being the best guitarist they could be in that band.
I know someone like that, in fact. His name was Bill Page, and he was a saxophone and reed instrument player, and he was the #1 saxophone player in Lawrence Welk's orchestra. Surely you have heard of Lawrence Welk. And I can jawbone for hours because I was pretty well close to some people who were in his band.
Oh, cool.
But Bill was a friend of the high school band director that was our high school band director. So he brought Bill Bell, I don't know how or what, but actually Mr. Taylor owned a music shop, so I bet he sold a lot of clarinets because Bill Bell was there. So that may have had something to do with it. But he was really brilliant. I was more impressed with his ability to play every instrument he brought, but when I first was impressed was how many he did bring. Because he had them all. He traveled with them all, including a contrabass saxophone.
Wow.
I mean, it was almost the size of a tuba.
That's a big mother. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got some curlicues in it, too.
Yeah.
So that's right. There are musicians who can become the height of their music. And Bill Bell was one of them, but he still didn't want to branch out and go for that solo thing, that he was happy and content with where he was. And that was part of what he was so impressive about him, was how happy he was at being the very best saxophone player that he could be
Mm.
without having to compete with any other saxophone players.
Yeah.
So this is a way of looking at it, but we can also get back to this quality of let's look at sympathetic vibration from two angles. One is how they make me feel, and the other one is how do I make them feel. And now we add this quality of joy. Which way does the joy go? In the beginning, for the students, the joy is supposed to come from taking your joy wherever you may find it. So if other people are joyful, you get on their bandwagon.
Mm.
But for the noble, it's the other way around. Now it is our job to spread the joy, to be
Right.
happy. It's almost a requirement to relate to people in a happy way, that we want to spread the joy. We want to let other people be happy. If you're determined to have a happy family, you will,
Mm.
because you make sure that you spread that joy. You keep moving it out, wanting it like that to go out. This is the right way to practice mudita, is by spreading it rather than hoping to get some of it.
Mm.
But it really is real.
Yeah.
There, even though the easiest way to know it is the sympathetic vibration of musical instruments. If you've got a violin in a room and it's got a properly tuned A, and you know that orchestra's tune on an A, can you imagine violinists having to tune with a fret?
Mm.
No. You've got to have an A on that violin. So you just set that violin down, and it's got an A right there. It's just not plucked yet.
Yeah.
Until you bring the guy in with the trumpet.
Mm.
And on the other side of the room, all he has to do is play an A, just a little short, and then you listen to that violin, and sure enough, it's humming right along.
Mm.
And you think those things don't happen in the human body?
Right.
What do you
Right.
think music does to people?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those same kind of sympathetic vibrations happen on a feeling level also. And that we hum right along with each other.
Yeah.
So that anger begets anger. In fact, if you're angry, your major intention is to get the other person angry.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two choices. If you're angry at him, you want him angry at you. And if you're angry at something on the outside, you want him to be angry at that same thing.
Right.
I hate my bank. I want you to hate my bank. And if I can't get you to hate my bank, then let's hate all banks together. I want some unity in this hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that mudita there. Only in here is working with anger and hatred. Now that we know that the object is, oh no, we've got to turn that around and make it joyful. Because that's what needs to be spread in this world. There's already enough sympathetic hate. We need some sympathetic joy.
Yes, we do.
And so with that, you can see that that's your job. Now, there's one more which is actually quite brilliant, and that is the equanimity that is so hard to attain through the Brahma Vihara practice, but is actually intentionally practiced in Anapanasati.
Mm.
In this regard, equanimity would also be referred to as balance, but a better way to look at it, so we can get a clue, is satisfaction.
Mm.
Equanimity means that I'm okay with it. I'm satisfied with the way things are. I don't want it any better than it is right now. This is good enough. If I'm not enlightened, I don't care. I like this very much. If I was completely satisfied, then how could I want enlightenment?
Right.
In that regard, enlightenment is not an issue. What is really the issue is this equanimity, this balance, this feeling good about how and what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, you can see how deeply and how easily the Brahma Viharas fits into the teachings of the Buddha, even though it came from outside the teachings of the Buddha. So the Buddha said, yeah, sure, why not? Let's bring that in too.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the problem with the Brahma Viharas on their own. They don't have the detailed steps, the actual stages, nor does it have any of the philosophical underpinnings and all of that makes the full teachings of the Dhamma, the Buddha Dhamma, such a complete thing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's so complete that it's actually terrifying to most people to get a load of how much there is to it.
Mm-hmm.
But once we start seeing what it is, it begins to fit all together like into a Chinese puzzle. So Buddhism for most people looked like a jigsaw puzzle with all the pieces separated out, just dumped on into the floor. That's Buddhism. But when you're able to start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, you say, oh, there's only one picture here.
Right.
And what is that picture? It's freedom.
Yeah.
And so the Brahma Viharas have that as a top goal, but they don't have the rungs of the ladder of what needs to be done to keep coming back to that place over and over and over again. That in fact, the whole Brahma Viharas gets to the point that it's so stepwise that no one ever gets past Metta.
Mm.
There's no prescribed practice of compassion.
Mm.
That mudita winds up being haphazard, and upekkha is non-existent. And so that's the problem with the metta practice until you fit it into anapanasati and the teaching of the Buddha, and you say, wow, look what a beautiful song that is.
Mm.
And I have been accused by even one of my students once of being against metta. But okay, I am. But that's only the first part of the sentence. But when you understand it in context, then you recognize, well, the context that metta goes into is actually a better way of looking at it than merely metta. Because metta by itself can be practiced wrongly, but there's also reports that women will go, especially women, will go into high states of bliss. They're crying and their eyes are red and they're just enjoying the heck out of it and they don't have a clue about how they got there. And so now they want to practice metta again to get that.
Mm.
But they can't because they don't know the actual process. It just kind of happens to them.
Mm.
But with anapanasati and knowing the various steps that have to be done, that little trip was step 9, step 10, step 1, step 2, step 6, step 7. So step 5, step 6, step 7, step 7, step 7. That's the way to go when you recognize it like that, and that will bring you, in that regard, into metta.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually sit there in that state of sukha and think about all beings be happy, and that's a much better thing to be thinking about than Aunt Susie and the fight you had with her yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could go so far as to say, yes, thoughts of metta are very wholesome
Mm-hmm.
and very useful for putting into a mind that's fit for work,
Mm.
and really start doing some metta.
Okay. So ultimately it's more important to first get the mind fit for work uh, before attempting any of the Brahma Vihara stuff.
Wouldn't you think that that would be a good idea?
Yeah.
Because what's the point of doing it with a mind that's not fit for work?
Sure.
I mean, that's the alternate question.
Yeah.
The answer is, well, if I do metta hard enough, It will become a mind fit for work. All right, I got you.
Yeah. Ah!
May all people be happy. Sorry, that laugh that I just did was not part of that routine. But you could do it with laughter, and then it would start to work.
Mm.
May all people be joyful. May all people be cackling with laughter. May all people get the cosmic joke.
Mm.
You're it. That's a way of looking at it. So if we could add great joy and happiness as part of the metta practice, now it's working.
Mm.
And that joy is, in fact, what's making the mind fit for work. So, in that regard, as I was saying, practicing metta correctly is anapanasati.
Mm.
And the quality that you're trying to develop with the word metta, in the sense of um, like, there's another phrase, kaliyamita. Now, the word mita and the word metta are very similar in that way. But this is the whole practice. This is something that the Buddha said. Ananda came and said, I have heard from other monks that friendship is half of the practice of the Buddha. And the Buddha probably snickered and pulled a joke out, dusted it off, and said, oh no, Ananda, friendship is the whole of the practice.
Mm.
Now, what did he mean by that? Well, he meant that when you can come to the position that you have completely cleaned out all of your conceit, and that in fact you do see everyone as a friend and you do not see any enemies out there. Now we're getting someplace. Now the
Yeah.
Buddha Dhamma is getting really noble, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Having no enemies, having no interlocutors, having no rivals,
Mm.
and especially having no nemesis.
Yeah.
You know what a nemesis is, by the way? The formal definition of a nemesis is one who is there to take revenge on you for the things you have done wrong in the past.
Mm.
In other words, you've hurt him and he's out for you now. He's out
Right.
for his revenge. That's a nemesis.
Interesting.
So let's not have any of those. Let's do some metta instead.
Yeah.
Let's all be happy and friendly together. Boy, wouldn't this world be different if that were true on a general level.
Indeed.
So this is the way that we want to practice. We want to practice and see if they're practicing metta without the foundation of anapanasati, in particular the point of sati. They can start with may all beings be happy, then they can start thinking about a few friends they want to be happy, and then they start thinking about what they did together, and then we're back into the past, and then we see that time when somebody got a broken leg, and off we go. You know,
Mm.
that's the problem with practicing metta without having the qualities of anapanasati built into it, to where we can stay with this issue of let's spread joy.
Mm.
Let me get enough of it right now so that when I get off of this cushion, I'll actually be able to spread it rather than sitting here wishing it be done.
Mm. Okay. Well then, all right. So I guess then the thing for me to do would be to get good at
Yeah, do some metta, please. Do it rightly, though. Do it with anapanasati and let those people be happy
Mhm.
by you going out and smiling at them.
Yeah. Yeah. So then so I suppose then the next thing would be to just get the mind more and more fit for work.
and enjoy that too.
And enjoy that.
And by the way, right after you come to the position that you know that you're watching the breath and that you're satisfied with that, that's the time to say, okay, now is time for sati, or excuse me, now is the time for metta, because that's a whole lot better thing to have in this mind that is getting fit for work than anything else.
Okay.
Start choosing what you're going to allow yourself to think about.
So the idea is to first get a solid foundation in Anapanasati, and then when you're kind of
Which
in the
will take you
mojo.
about 3 seconds. Take a breath, and there you are. Don't make it a big deal. Something that you hope for next year that you'll be ready to do, Metta. Oh no, you're ready to do it with this in-breath. Take a deep breath that's satisfying, and there you are. Don't make this a future. Remember, Buddha not big on future and past.
No.
Well, you look happy enough right now.
Sure.
So I don't have to even say, may you be happy. You already are.
So, no need to like modify anything I'm doing to greater incorporate that stuff, or?
Well, like I said, if you want, that's one of the most wholesome thoughts that you could have, is for the whole crowd, your whole troop, to be at peace, to be at rest, to take a load off. If you can do it, everybody can do it. And it's your job to start showing folks how, one at a time. And you start with a smile. That's the way to go.
Okay.
One easy step at a time, but that's off the cushion. While you're on the cushion, make sure that you can maintain that the mind is not going to be thinking about things that are unwholesome, and allow it to only have wholesome thoughts. And metta, when practiced correctly, is quite wholesome. Compassion is quite wholesome.
So, metta and the Brahma Viharas in general practiced on the cushion. What would that look like?
Oh, wow, may all beings be happy. Looks like that.
Because I've definitely done that kind of a practice of sort of like the gentle repetition of the phrases, and of coming back, kind of like using the phrases as the sati thing. And I've found that can lead to some pretty interesting places where those feelings can then start to
Watch
bloom.
where those places are. Watch where you're going. Pay close attention. Don't make them magical when you get there and you don't know how you got there. Watch how you get there.
Yeah. I mean, it seems that I just get there by just continuing to remember, continuing to come back, and it sort of does itself.
Exactly. The mind gets settled down, and then all kinds of interesting things that you didn't see before become visible.
Yeah.
So it's a mystery tour, but it's not a magical mystery tour.
But it is coming to take you away.
Yeah, that. And actually, you kind of give it up really easily. Yeah. And don't need that selfishness either. Dukkha.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you have any more questions about metta and all of that?
I guess I've just been a little sort of mixed up in terms of like what my core practice
You don't need
is
a core practice. You need to investigate all of that stuff. Stop trying
okay.
to figure out what you don't need to look at.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting.
Yes, you've got a lot of friends to make in there.
Mm.
Anxiety, fear,
Yes,
sadness,
definitely.
joy.
Hmm.
A lot of friends to make. So you start to investigate those things.
Mm.
Let them become part of you rather than a driver of you.
Mm.
That they're not going to drive you around anymore. You're not going to be required to do what your feelings order you to do.
Hmm.
But you're not going to strangle them by the throat either. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So what you have to do is make friends with them.
Hmm.
And that friend-making quality is the pacification. And it's also the collecting of the factors together for samadhi,
Mm.
so that you become unified as a whole human being, completely unified in mind, without being driven by greed, anger, frustration. You don't let that stuff run your life anymore.
Hmm. So basically, just keep doing what I'm doing.
Right. Keep watching.
Keep
Keep
watching.
watching.
All right. Cool.
Especially when you feel really good. That's the time to be on guard to make sure that you don't allow any unwholesome thoughts to rise in the mind.
Hmm.
That's what to watch out for. And so Metta, sure, come right on in.
Hmm. All right. Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, we'll talk to you again soon.
Great. Will do.
This has been a very enjoyable conversation. I've liked it.
Indeed. Me too.
A lot of meta here.
Yeah.
Max, see you later.
All right. See you later now. Bye bye.
Bye bye.